On Sunday, August 7th, 2016, 27-year-old Vanessa Marcotte was visiting her mother, Rosanna, in the small town of Princeton, Massachusetts. It was a sunny and warm day, and as usual, Vanessa decided to go for a run. She was an active person, often taking walks outdoors and practicing yoga. Later that day, she planned to take a bus to New York City, where she worked and lived. However, Vanessa never returned after her run. Rosanna grew worried, as it was unusual for Vanessa to be gone for so long. Concerned, she went to the police for help. This case quickly garnered national media attention, since such an incident had not occurred in the small town of Princeton in over 30 years. In fact, just a few days before, a similar case had happened in New York City when 30-year-old fitness blogger Karina Vetrano was attacked during a run. Vanessa Teresa Marcotte was born on June 17, 1989, in Leominster, Massachusetts. She was a standout student and graduated summa cum laude from Boston University in 2011 with a degree in communications. After college, she worked at an online marketing startup in Boston, WordStream, before joining Google's New York City office as an account manager. Every couple of months, Vanessa would visit her mother and aunt, who lived in the rural town of Princeton, a place with a population of just about 4,000. As an only child, her mother, Rosanna, cherished these visits. On the afternoon of August 7, 2016, around 1 p.m., Vanessa left her mother's home on Brook Station Road for her run. The area was familiar to her, and she planned to catch the commuter bus to New York later that day. After several hours passed with no word from Vanessa, Rosanna contacted the police. Search teams immediately began scouring the area along Vanessa's route. At around 8:20 p.m., a police dog picked up Vanessa's scent and led officers to a secluded area of dense vegetation, about 60 yards from the road and less than a mile from her mother's home. There they found her body. It was quickly identified as Vanessa Marcotte. A preliminary examination revealed that Vanessa's death was clearly criminal. Her body had been stripped of clothing, and there were burn marks on her hands, face, and legs. Investigators noticed the location was very isolated. Only woods and the road separated by dense vegetation. Additionally, her cell phone and headphones were missing, which detectives suspected the killer had taken to remove any potential DNA evidence. A sneaker with signs of being burned was found near her body, along with other traces of fire in the area, leading detectives to believe the perpetrator had used gasoline in an attempt to destroy evidence. Forensic experts confirmed that Vanessa had been strangled, and DNA from an unknown person was found under her fingernails, indicating she had fought back. The case shocked the local community of Princeton, where violent crimes like this were extremely rare. Authorities urged residents to stay alert and report any suspicious activity to the Massachusetts State Police or the Princeton Police Department. On August 11th, District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. held a press conference confirming that the perpetrator was likely male and had sustained cuts, bruises, or scratches during the struggle with Vanessa. Vanessa's tragic death sent shockwaves beyond her family in the town of Princeton. A Google representative described her as a beloved team member, known for her passion for volunteer work, her love of Boston sports, and her ever-present smile. Her alma mater, Boston University, also paid tribute to her, expressing their deep sadness. Police initially considered whether there was a connection between Vanessa's case and the death of Karina Vetrano, a runner from New York City. Just days earlier, on August 2, 2016, Karina had gone for a run in Spring Creek Park in Queens. After failing to respond to calls and texts, her father began searching for her. He eventually found her body in the park, face down, about 15 feet from the trail. Like Vanessa, Karina had been strangled, and her body was exposed. Despite the eerie similarities, investigators did not initially believe the cases were connected. 6 months later, a breakthrough came when DNA from Karina's body was matched to that of Chanel Lewis, a 20-year-old Brooklyn resident. Lewis was arrested, and in April 2019, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But the question remained, who was responsible for Vanessa Marcotte's death? Investigators believe the person who killed her either lived in or frequently visited the area, but the case remains open. Detectives believe the perpetrator had either lived in or frequently visited Princeton and was likely very familiar with the area. They also concluded that Vanessa Marcotte did not know the attacker and that their paths had crossed purely by chance. Law enforcement once again reached out to the public for help, setting up separate 24-hour phone lines for tips. Eventually, an eyewitness came forward and reported seeing Vanessa stop outside a local convenience store for a drink of water just after 1 p.m. on August 7th. She was last seen walking and talking on her cell phone. Investigators believe the attack occurred within 2 hours of that sighting, as her phone was turned off at 2:11 p.m. and had not been used since. Despite extensive searches, including repeated checks of the area where Vanessa's body was found, police were not yielding the results they hoped for. It wasn't until 3 months later that a new lead emerged. A witness reported seeing a dark-colored Ford SUV parked near the scene with its hood up. The driver, described as a Hispanic male between 25 and 35 years old, was standing next to the vehicle and talking on the phone when first spotted around 12:45 p.m. The SUV was still there at 2:05 p.m., but with the hood down and no one visible. This information led authorities to focus their search on a Hispanic man who might have owned a black SUV and lived near Princeton. On February 23, 2017, more than 6 months after Vanessa's death, Worcester County District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. shared new details. The DNA found on Vanessa's body had been sent for testing, and a suspect profile was created. Investigators now believe the suspect was a Hispanic male, aged 20 to 30, with an athletic build, medium height, and shorter shaved hair. They also suspected he had either owned or had access to a dark-colored SUV on the day of the crime, and that he likely had visible upper body injuries from the attack. Less than 3 weeks later, a police officer in Worcester saw a man who matched this description. The man was driving a vehicle identical to the one seen near the crime scene on the day of Vanessa's death. The officer quickly wrote down the vehicle's license plate number. After identifying the owner of the car, the police visited the man's home. The individual was 31-year-old Angelo Colon Ortiz. Colon Ortiz, a Puerto Rican native with no criminal history, had been living in Worcester for less than a year. He worked as a contractor for FedEx and made deliveries in the area, so he was familiar with Princeton. Neighbors described him as being inappropriate, often making vulgar comments. A former female postal worker from Princeton also claimed that Colon Ortiz had made crude remarks in Spanish to her and other women. When questioned by the police, Colon Ortiz denied knowing Vanessa Marcotte. He claimed not to remember if he had been in Princeton on the day of the attack. He was asked to provide a DNA sample, which he agreed to do, signing a document authorizing the test. After a delay, lab results showed that his DNA matched the DNA found under Vanessa's fingernails. On April 15, 2017, Colon Ortiz was arrested and charged. Prosecutors alleged that on the day of the crime, he had purchased $5 worth of gasoline from a store located 6 miles from the scene at 2:35 p.m. By that time, Vanessa was already dead, and Colon Ortiz was believed to have returned to the crime scene to try to destroy evidence, particularly DNA on her body. Though Colon Ortiz's attorneys argued that his DNA was obtained improperly, citing a language barrier and confusion about his rights, the judge ruled against suppressing the evidence. In January 2022, the court rejected the defense's motion to suppress the DNA evidence. Colon Ortiz did not plead guilty to first-degree murder. Instead, as part of a plea bargain, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and robbery, charges that carried a shorter sentence. Prosecutors stated that the Marcotte family agreed to the plea deal to avoid a lengthy and traumatic trial. They expressed relief that Colon Ortiz would be in prison where he could no longer harm others. The Marcotte family released a statement. "We are thankful and pleased that the trial ended the way we always wanted it to. That this man will now be in a place where he cannot hurt anyone the way he hurt Vanessa." Vanessa's father added, "Let's keep this monster off the streets. I'll be dead long before he gets a parole hearing." In October 2022, Angelo Colon Ortiz, now 36, was sentenced to life in prison. He will serve 20 years for the robbery charge, followed by a life sentence with a minimum of 25 years before becoming eligible for parole, which means he won't be eligible for release for at least 45 years. For more stories, like my video and subscribe my channel.